Did you know Louis Vuitton, one of the top luxury brands worldwide, was founded by a once homeless man? From the streets to this multi-billion company, from rags to riches, let's talk about the history behind one of the richest men in the world, his humble background, and the powerful Louis Vuitton. Once there was a man who lived in the streets and later became a successful startup owner, Louis Vuitton. When you hear about this name, you think of one of the most prominent luxury brands worldwide. But there's so much more to talk about behind this name. Louis Vuitton was born in Angers, France on August 4, 1821. Like other luxury brand owners, Vuitton wasn't born with a golden spoon in his mouth. He came from a humble family whose father was a farmer and mother was a hat maker. Most of his childhood, Vuitton spent on the farm, helping his parents by taking care of the crops and livestock. Vuitton also lived a Cinderella-like life when he unfortunately lost his mother at the age of 10, while his father immediately married another woman who was extremely wicked to him. After his father died in 1835, at the age of 13, Vuitton ran away from home as he found it extremely difficult to continue staying with his wicked stepmother. As he grew up from a family of farmers and milliners, Vuitton had seen poverty closely. He became homeless. With nowhere else to go, as he struggled on the streets of France, he headed to Paris and walked the 292 miles from his town to Paris. With a hope to live while struggling, he had to work odd jobs with artisans and craftsmen for him to survive, as he had no shelter and money. These jobs allowed Vuitton to gain valuable skills on how to work with stone, fabrics, metal, and wood. But the money he gained from working was hardly enough to help him survive. Barely making ends meet, Vuitton had to sleep on the streets. 2 years later, Vuitton arrived in Paris, where he met and worked for a luggage maker, Monsieur Marechal, who taught him to create durable containers. Because of his valuable skills and positive attitude, he soon became the favorite of Monsieur Marechal's valuable clients. The young boy's services were in high demand due to his mastery. Unaware of the fact that he would one day create a billion-dollar luxury brand, Vuitton ended up working as a personal box maker for the wife of Emperor Napoleon III, the Empress of France, Eugénie de Montijo. This privilege of work for the emperor's wife had opened a lot of doors to multiple opportunities for Vuitton. From a homeless luggage maker, he became a successful startup owner. After Vuitton met and married Clémence Émilie Perrault in 1854, he opened his first shop at Rue Neuve des Capucines. At the time, Vuitton was only making his traditional luggage boxes, all of which had a round top to let the water run off and were made of leather. However, the boxes couldn't secure the items inside. Later in his career, in 1858, Vuitton started making his own unique and quality luggage boxes with a flat top and a tumbler lock to prevent theft. He invented the first steamer trunk. It was made from a gray canvas called Trianon, which is the brand's signature today. In less than 2 years, Vuitton became one of the most prominent luggage owners in France. His business became successful and widely known, and his luggage boxes became the must-have item amongst the people in France. In 1867, the successful Vuitton decided to expand his business itinerary and decided to do it. He then introduced more quality and modern handbags to people, and his invention was immediately received well by most of the women. The demand for Vuitton's handbags then grew massively every day. However, not every day was a bed of roses for Vuitton. The roadblocks hit Vuitton in his career path. As his business was exploding, unfortunately, the Franco-Prussian War erupted in France in 1870. This prompted Vuitton to close his business. He and his family had to move out of their home and vacated to a cramped shelter amongst other refugees. Vuitton and his family, along with other refugees, were almost starved to death as food was scarcely available. After the war ended a year later, Vuitton and his family returned home. From there, he discovered that all his materials had been stolen and his workshop was destroyed. Although he tried to work for his patron, the Empress of France Eugénie, he couldn't because she was in exile after her husband, former Emperor Napoleon III, was driven out of power because of the Prussian victory. However, This incident did not set him back. Vuitton, with no other choice, had to use his last savings. After the war, Vuitton looked for a new place to open a workshop and rebuild his business again. At the time, the prices for properties had dropped considerably, which helped the luggage maker to open his new shop at an upscale part of Paris, France. In 1872, Vuitton had managed to bring his luggage business back. He then created the popular and modern striped pattern on his luggage boxes, which was loved by many people. The newly invented design stood out. In 1885, the luggage maker traveled to London and opened another shop to expand his business and sell more of his products. At the time, London was the world's richest country. It was also dubbed as the financial center and the capital of the British Empire. During this time, Vuitton's business started operating on an international level, and his clients at the time included more millionaires from America, rich explorers, and even royals. In 1888, Vuitton released the checkered canvas, which became the starting point for the stenciled canvases that cover the trunks of the Maison de Luxe. During this time, a lot of counterfeits came up, and this prompted Vuitton to encrypt L. Vuitton as a trademark of registered trade, which successfully thwarted the first counterfeits. In 1889, Vuitton launched his patented multi-gorge lock with a legendary design which protected owners from burglars at the time. The boxes were tamper-proof and offered many unique keys which are registered with the customers' names. However, not all the time is sunshine and rainbows. As Vuitton's business continued to grow, in 1892, the famous luggage box maker died at the age of 72. He passed away, and the real cause of his death is still unknown till now. After Vuitton's passing, his son, Georges Vuitton, took over the business and continued his father's legacy. He was an excellent businessman who made his father's business a global phenomenon, increasing the reputation of Louis Vuitton internationally. Born on July 13, 1857, Georges was the only son of Louis Vuitton and Clémence Émile Vuitton. When Louis was 50 years old, he thought that he could no longer manage the business alone, so he prepared Georges to take over and decided to give his son an Anglo-Saxon education. Georges studied in England for 2 years. A year after his father's death in 1893, Georges traveled to the United States for the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Georges then helped his father's company grow even more after the latter's passing and partnered with a U.S. Postmaster General, John Wanamaker. This partnership allowed the company to be more prominent among potential customers after Wanamaker started selling Louis Vuitton's products in his New York department stores. In 1896, Vuitton's son created the floral pattern with an L and a V interlocked to honor his father's memory, which is popularly known as the monogram canvas. It was the first time that there's a brand placed on the product aside from his father's name. At the time, Georges had a wife named Josephine Petrel, who was a daughter of the founder of Arome Petrel. He also had children named Marie-Louise, Gaston-Louise, Jean, Pierre, and Marcel Vuitton. The next year, the first prototypes of automobile trunks were presented at several trade shows and offered them to travelers and explorers. This car would allow them to carry cargo that had the same quantity as a boat or train. In 1901, Georges wrote the first travel book published by Louis Vuitton titled Les Voyages. In 1908, Louis' only son officially proposed a project which was called the Aero Trunk that had the ability to support the creation of helicopter prototypes made by his twin son, Jean and Pierre. However, Georges later passed away in 1936. Gaston Vuitton, who was the eldest, took over the family business. Gaston then passed the business to his sons, who later on asked their sister's husband, Henry Resamier, to take over. Resamier changed the business model and turned the small leather shop into an international network of company-operated shops around the world to sell the merchandise. He successfully managed to launch all the Louis Vuitton stores around the world that we all see today. In 1984, Resamier made the Louis Vuitton public at the stock exchange. 3 years later, Louis Vuitton reached nearly $1 billion in sales, and Resamier merged Moet Hennessy and Louis Vuitton, and the LVMH was born. In 1987, LVMH chairman Resamier invited Bernard Arnault to invest in the company. However, after that, Rassemir and his co-founder Alain Chevalier had an open war against Bernard Arnault, who was taking over power. The controversy arose after Rassemir, who is married to the great-granddaughter of the Vuitton company's founder, found his position threatened by Arnault, who wanted to be the lord of the company. But Rassemir, who was the head of the company at the time, wanted to be free from Arnault's fiefdom. The war resulted in the successful takeover of Arnault and kicked out Rassemir from the company board by 1990. Rassemir, losing a court battle against his younger rival, Arnault, however, was ironic because Rassemir brought Arnault into the firm as a potential ally because, unfortunately, corporate battles do not involve counts and barons or dynasties like Vuitton's in the United States. As someone who was scrambling to seize power, Arnault won against Rassemir. However, the former faced backlash among the public, including many Frenchmen. The battle made headlines and was dubbed as the Young Wolf versus the Old Lion by the French press. Following the bitter feud, Rassemir turned to sailing and music and became a major patron and philanthropist to the Opéra National de Paris. In 2003, Rassemir died at the age of 91 after suffering a heart attack while on holiday in Sardinia. Meanwhile, Louis Vuitton's great-great-great-grandson, 44-year-old Benoit Louis Vuitton, is the frontman for the French luxury house, the Asnières family house. Recently, Benoit Louis hosted an intimate virtual tour of the family house and atelier in Asnières that Louis Vuitton built near Paris, France. As of January 13, 2023, Louis Vuitton net worth is $430.29 billion, and Bernard Arnault remains as the chairman and CEO of LVMH Moet Hennessy.